Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, April 28th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Today we're going to tie a bow on the Chiefs draft with Star columnists Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian, and later we'll hear from Chiefs CEO and Chairman Clark Hunt. He spoke to reporters during the draft on Saturday, and I thought he had some interesting things to say about the Chiefs being the hunted and not the hunter in the NFL. Hey, don't get me wrong, Vahe and Sam also said some interesting things, and we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get to them, and if you haven't already heard, the Chiefs released longtime punter Dustin Colquitt. It must have happened late Monday because Dustin posted a note on his Instagram account later Monday. Most of us didn't find out about it until Tuesday morning. It's a tough call for the Chiefs and a tough break for the community. At 15 seasons, he matches former punter Gerald Wilson as the longest tenured player in team history when it comes to the number of years, and Colquitt's 238 games are the most in Chiefs history. He's punted for more than 50,000 yards, but Colquitt's great skill was dropping punts inside the 20 to flip the field. More than a third of his career punts pinned opponents inside the 20. Colquitt's also been a remarkable citizen athlete, if that's a term I can use. Soon after arriving to the Chiefs from the University of Tennessee, he got heavily involved with Team Smile. That's an organization that donates dental care to children and promotes oral health. What a great cause. Colquitt wanted to play at least another season with the Chiefs, but the NFL can be a cold business, and this move was an example of that. All right, let's jump in for more post-draft talk with Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian. Sam and Vahe are here. Well, Sam is there. Vahe is here, sitting at least 6 feet away from me because that is socially safe.
Yeah, plus I just don't want to be that close to you anyway.
No. That's right. I mean, we were practicing this before. Before it was in vogue.
Comes easy.
That's right. Hey, so I talked to Herbie Teope yesterday about we drilled down on the players and talked about the draft in sort of individual fashion. I wanted to talk to you guys more generally about what the Chiefs did or didn't do, and then how. Let me just ask: Did the Chiefs draft? Is it going to help them in 2020, or did they even need to have a draft this year?
It's funny because we've kind of all in some way or another had that little sentiment this year, in the last couple of weeks as we led up to the draft. That feeling of, they'd still be the team to deal with if they didn't participate, but they were allowed to participate. And for my money, just a quick touch on this. I mean, I think they got a little better. I know Sam, if he were general manager, might have done something different in that first round. I see the method to the madness, but I get that there was a greater need. What's really interesting about their philosophy offensively, though, it clearly has become a, sensory overload of offensive tools, whatever you want to call it. And there's something rather fascinating and thrilling about that. But, we recognize that the reason they got to the Super Bowl last year was because they did some stuff about the defense, too. So, anyway, that's just my little bit. I think they're better, and I think there are a couple guys that are going to be able to play right away. Or ish.
Right. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, so it's complicated. I hope I can articulate everything that's in my head right now.
We're counting on it.
I do think that I do think that they would be the Super Bowl favorites if they were not allowed to draft anybody. I do believe that, and I think that they returned 20 of 22 starters and drafted 2 and maybe 3 guys that can start for them this next season, whenever that season starts. That's a pretty damn good place to be. I think that they got better. I don't know that they got as much better as other teams because everybody got better. But that's what happens when you're drafted in 32, when you have the last pick in the first round. I do think, if I was in charge, I would have drafted a defensive back, maybe Antoine Midfield Jr. or Xavier McKinney or something like that, just because I think that's where they needed the help more. That's a guy that could have, been the biggest upgrade over what they have, I guess, in some ways. You know what? But I say that, and I believe it, but I also respect the holy hell out of looking at your roster and saying, basically, you know what would screw with the rest of the AFC the most is if we took this guy who is a perfect fit for our offense and just said, we're going to score 40 a game. And, maybe our offense is, in the middle of the pack or whatever, like it was, maybe our defense is middle of the pack, like it was last year, but that's going to be more than enough because we're going to have plays where Tyreek Hill is going deep, Travis Kelce is over the middle, Sammy Watkins is doing some dig route, McCole Hardman is streaking down the other sideline, and now we have this guy with just almost freakish quickness. He's not the fastest guy, but his just kind of cut on a dime. We got him coming out of the backfield to catch passes. And the play, everybody obviously can just Google or YouTube his name, I guess, and see a number of tremendous plays. But the ones that stick out to me the most are these angle routes that he does out of the backfield, where he's isolated one-on-one with either a safety or a linebacker, and it looks like maybe he's going, whether it's a wheel route or something down the sideline, and then he just cuts in the same way that I think we've all marveled and talked about here and written about, the way that Tyreek Hill, he's obviously fast as hell, but his superpower is in his ability to not slow down and sometimes even appear to speed up when he changes directions. He takes that kind of pivot cut. And I think Edwards-Helaire does the same thing, and he does it on these angle routes so beautifully, where he gets the linebacker or safety thinking he's going one way, and then it's a juke the other way, and he's wide open, and that's easy yards. And I just don't know how the hell you defend that. So I understand the logic, and I admire the hell out of it. I just thought they could have improved a little bit more if they took a defensive back. But that's, I wish sometimes in these jobs, I wish everything was either this is the best or this is the worst. It seems like that's what people want. But, I get it. It's not what I would have done, but I totally get it and can see it working out.
So when the pick was made, you and I were talking live, Sam, and we were both surprised, of course, first of all, that they took a running back and they took that running back. And so you had to write, immediately from that and draw some kind of conclusion. And I think the national idea at the moment was, what? They did what? And they took him. But before the draft started the next day, I noticed the tone changing to, damn, the Chiefs just got better offensively. And the other comment I wanted to make was, in previous regimes, and we've been around long enough to know that when the Chiefs made a pick, especially early in the draft, that was a little bit questionable, you just got mad at the Chiefs. And what are you doing? And now when they make a pick like that, it's hidden genius.
You know what? That is funny how that battle of perception changes, right? And it's partly it's a sense of conviction or whatever you want to call it, credibility that I think we can place upon these guys by now. Certain method to the madness, even if it's something we don't really agree with. And look, I mean, it's the position they're in. They by doing the things they've done the last few years, they've sort of earned the benefit of the doubt, I'd say. Not every pick's working out, but quite a few have. And so I wasn't here for the previous regimes of reigns of error. So it
trust us.
I saw a few different things in St. Louis in my time, but yeah. So anyway, Sam, you're better equipped to elaborate on this.
Well, I mean, for sure, there was a time when you could just blindly say the Chiefs made a mistake, and usually you're right. You know what I mean? Like that those years were long and plentiful. But I think it's more than and if you win the dang Super Bowl, what more benefit some of the positivity from it, including what I'm saying out loud, that I expect him to be a really productive back, and I expect him to be one of these guys that goes early in fantasy drafts, because I think he can put up a lot of numbers and highlights and be a really, really good player for him. But it's more than just benefit of the doubt. I think that we've been talking about this, and we've been writing about this, so this isn't hindsight at all. It is that they put themselves in a position where who they drafted had a better chance of success than if they were drafted in another place. For instance, I believe that would have been the case with a defensive back, especially one with some versatility to go between safety and maybe slot corner. I believe that player would have had a really good chance to be more successful with the Chiefs, with Steve Spagnuolo's system, than the average NFL team. I think that's part of why I thought that's the direction they should have gone. I also believe that Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be a good player wherever. I just think he's that kind of, there's certain elite guys. DeAndre Swift is the same way. There's certain guys that are they're good enough to get it done. But the Chiefs have built this, sort of context in which this is the best place for him. And, when you're in that kind of position, when you're in a position where the players that you bring in are going to be better for you, have a better, platform for success than they would in a lot of other places like that, that's when you start to, this term like force multiplier, right? Like that's the genius of Patrick Mahomes. It's not just, 4th and 9 against the Ravens or whatever. It's that his unique talents spread around the roster and make other people better, indirectly and directly. And that's sort of, that's why I wrote the thing the other day about, the game is rigged. Like, it is rigged because the Chiefs have a context in this moment where players that they have are going to be better than they would in other places. It's the same thing the Patriots have been doing for years, and now it's existing here.
Something that you said, Sam, it made me think of this, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys say about this. Part of where all this starts is some kind of obvious chemistry or same pageness or proper, optimal relationship between Andy and Brett. And
totally.
when they brought Brett on, I have to admit, I just thought rubber stamp for Andy, and I'm sure the dynamics of that are a little different than we see publicly. But I have come to believe, especially in the last year or so, that it is much closer to what they present it to be than I had thought it was. I think Brett really is presenting to Andy and convincing Andy, and whatever persuasion factor is there is how it's working as opposed to the other way around. I think for a long time I sort of felt like Andy knew what he wanted and he'd say, this is what we want.
My sense is that Brett does his own work, his own evaluations, sees what's out there. But Andy has and should have, the ability. If Andy really wants somebody, that guy's going to be with the Chiefs. Brett's going to move mountains to try and get that done. But I think that Andy respects Brett enough on a few different levels, personally, professionally, everything, to, okay, if he's really high on this group of 5 players out of this class, I'm going to take a damn hard look at them. And if they don't impress me the first time, I'm going to watch them a second and a third time. And I think that that's part of it, too. And I think that Andy is able to order up, what we need is, whatever, a versatile lineman around the 3rd round that maybe play tackle but can kick inside, something like that. And Brett can go find, Lucas Niang out of TCU or whatever. I think that they have a really good, cohesion and working relationship that way, where Brett's not the errand boy, and they're both comfortable in that Andy, and he's been around forever. He's had a lot of success. That Andy, probably has a little more sway over personnel, but they really do have a good respect and working relationship. And that is one thing, not to keep referring to the time before this, but we've seen what happens when front offices and coaching staffs don't get along. We saw maybe the clearest example of that in modern NFL history with the Chiefs right before Andy and John Dorsey came on, and
I think Andy likes to say, well, Brett will get you that. Or Doris will get that to you.
He does like to say that no matter what. Hey, sorry, let me chime in with one other real quick point on this, too. And sorry, Blair, you didn't really get to respond to that yet. But Brett said something interesting yesterday, and you could make a case it's a little self-serving or a little just, without the knowledge of how these other relationships work. But he brought up the point that Andy, that he doesn't think anybody in the league probably has a stronger quarterback, GM, coach relationship than the three of them. I think that's probably true. And I think that's somewhat at the nucleus of something here. I don't exactly know what, but when you think of the contagion sort of, that's a bad term to use right now, I guess, but the way Patrick holds sway in the locker room, as you were noting earlier, the influence that has on the sense of possibility and who wants to play here, all that, that's a pretty potent three-headed monster.
Yeah, I don't know how to measure something like that, right? Like, if we're going to take it literally, I think they've got a good thing going in New Orleans, for instance, or, Seattle, a couple other places. But, yeah, I mean, it's hard to make the case that anything else is better. We talked about this in parts too, but part of what I mean by, sort of the force multiplier thing is, if you think of Andy, what was long said to be, like a major weakness of his before the last couple of years, and it was, sort of everything was a check down. Everything was a pass to the back, sort of lateral passing and all that stuff. They don't attack down. What was said about Mahomes, going into the draft, the big weakness was, is he too reckless? Does he, try to attack down too much and not take, sort of the easy play? And gosh dang it, like they really fit like a glove, Patrick's, sort of otherworldly arm talent allows them to attack downfield. Andy's structure and thought and design and all those things gives, Patrick's, these other outlets, to take the easy play when it's there, where maybe he didn't have, the context wasn't there at Tech because they were always down 13 points and they needed to score in a hurry. So, that's another thing too of just, it's easy to see how he makes Tyreek Hill better, or makes Cole Hardman better, or makes the lineman better because he can scramble to throw. But I think he makes Andy better too. I mean, it's just the force multiplier thing. It's just all over, up and down the franchise roster.
I think one way that manifests itself is in the lack of turnovers that the Chiefs commit. That it's like a dedication to that idea. And Mahomes threw 2 picks in the Super Bowl. Those are the first two picks that he had thrown in the postseason in 5 games in the postseason. May have been, I can't remember a fumble. May have been the first 2 turnovers the Chiefs had in the last 2 years in a playoff game. So I just think that I like what you said. I like what both of you guys said about this, and right now you've got to. I guess you just have to work with the idea that the Chiefs are. We're kind of circle back to where we started. The Chiefs probably didn't need to worry about what people thought about them in this draft. They were, they had the luxury of making moves in this draft that, they get their own guys and, people that they identified as, superior athletic talent. And I think that explains Willie Gay in the second round.
I heard, I'm kind of clinging on to just one little word that you said there, luxury. Like one of the criticisms of that edwards-helaire pick was sort of, if you've got some things you need to address on the defense or even interior offensive line, that probably would have been too high to take anybody after Ruiz was off the board. But, if you're in that position, like, what are you doing taking a luxury pick like that? They call it a luxury pick. It's like, who buys luxury items is the rich, and right now the Chiefs are pretty rich. And again, I'm saying all this as somebody that believes, I expected them to, and thought they probably should have gone with somebody on defense. But it's easy to see the logic behind what they do, which I've always believed this. I think that's the only sort of relevant and fair take, to use that word, that you could have about a draft, just in the hours and days after it happens.
Do we think the rest of the AFC West had the Chiefs in mind when they picked early?
I don't know. I was thinking about that, and I think you could make the case. If you wanted to argue that, you could argue it right now that they're all trying to keep up with the weapons and everything like that. But what if they went all defense? Then you'd say, they're trying to defend Mahomes, and that was their whole thing. So I don't know. But I do think that they all got better. I really like, if the Chargers hit on Herbert, and I'm not going to pretend that I've watched hours and hours of Justin Herbert tape and can tell you how he's going to translate. But if they hit on him, it's easy to see how they could be, a perennial playoff team going forward. With the Kenneth Murray, they've got a lot of kind of versatile, guys on that defense. Derwin James is such a stud. They've got some guys that can play on that side of the ball. They got some playmakers. I love what the Broncos did. They're really just giving Drew Lock the best opportunity possible to be a success. I thought both those teams got a lot better for sure.
What did you think about? We'll end on this because we're gonna hear from Clark Hunt and his comments on Saturday when we're finished gabbing. But just a thought on the presentation throughout the draft. Roger Goodell, I thought did a really nice job in a difficult situation, both Thursday and Friday when he did the second and third rounds, and just the fact that the picks were made from people's homes, coaches' homes, general managers, and then we saw the families get to celebrate. That was my concern going in. What kind of scenes would that provide? And I think we actually saw some really good ones from players and their families. But what did you think of the way it came off?
I'll just say for my part, I thought it really came off well. I think well enough that you could see the case to be made for doing it even when you don't have to this way. Now, how much of that will take, who knows? I think we're all very tempted to see this right now as we see a new way and people are going to change and they're going to do things differently. And the NFL coaches and general managers now see they can be around their families during all this. I say when they don't have to, they won't. I might be wrong about that. And just from a media procedure thing real quick, I would say it was quite efficient for us. Not that necessarily matters to our audience as much as it matters to us, but we were able to be more attuned to when we were going to get people, what the pace of that was going to be, and I think just do our jobs a little more efficiently.
Yeah, I thought it was great, and I thought even adjusting for sort of the novelty of it, which made everything more interesting. Not just that, but just the desperation that I think a lot of us had for anything that's just remotely related to sports that we don't know the outcome of yet, right? But I thought it was great, and I thought, I'm actually writing something about along these lines today, but Roger Goodell is one of the easiest punching bags in sports, right? If you just criticize Roger Goodell, chances you're going to have an audience. I thought he was amazing. I think that this was his best moment as the commissioner. Not just what he did on the broadcast last week, which I thought was really great. Even he screwed up some basic facts and said that Las Vegas had been awarded the 2020 NFL draft and stuff like that. But who cares? I thought he was. He played along with the booing. I loved how he just got progressively just more casual to the point where it was just you expected him to just show up in a T-shirt and hit one pick and mustard stains on his shirt or whatever. But I also thought just guiding the league through this, there were a lot of people, including some owners who are his bosses, that wanted this thing delayed either because of the technology or because of the optics or whatever. And he was adamant and thought that they could pull it off with technology and thought that they could make some adjustments about the optics and stuff like that. And he was dead right. He was absolutely right. And the whole thing I thought was, if not literally flawless or perfect, about as close as you could reasonably expect for sure.
Well, I think we can all agree that his biggest mistake was mispronouncing Appalachian State. But
That hit some of us differently than it did others. I mean, he's like, one of my favorite, like, sort of subtle moments was when Tua got drafted, and he looked at that card, and it was just like, oh, crap. And he just sort of, you know, like, looked back, and he was so shook. I don't think he said, like, quarterback Alabama or whatever. I love that moment. He was just visibly stunned. I was here for it.
all right, when we come back, we're going to hear from Chiefs CEO and Chairman Clark Hunt. This was from Saturday. Before we do, let's say goodbye to Sam and Vahe. Thanks, guys.
Bye, Blair.
See you.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening.
There's probably a million ways of building a championship team, but you've got Pat Mahomes. I was wondering whether there's been any discussions, at least that you've been part of, with Brett, Andy, Tim Terry, whoever, that because of Pat's abilities and because of his maybe generational potential, you guys have to do whatever you got to do to surround him with good offensive skill players. Has that been a talking point for the organization?
Well, my sense is you're asking the question in the context of really building standpoint, and I wouldn't say that's the case, but you are right that a big part of what Brett and Andy have done over the last 2+ years is to try to bring in players that are going to make that offense go. Clearly, Pat's a very unique talent, and having great receivers, great running backs, offensive linemen who can block for him is very, very important. But it's not important to the exclusion of building a great defense. I think the last 2 years was a really good teaching point on that we weren't able to get to the Super Bowl 2 years ago because the defense wasn't quite where it needed to be, and we made some big moves last year that really improved the defense, and that got us to Miami where we were able to lift the Lombardi Trophy.
All right, we'll go to Nate Taylor. Go ahead, Nate.
Hey, Clark. When the start of free agency began, just how much of your feeling was to try to retain as much talent from the championship team as much as you could over the course of free agency and obviously before heading into the draft, and just how much have you sort of tried to get an understanding from both Andy and Brett about how the team can sustain its sort of this excellent run over the next course of the next 2 to 3 years versus just maybe being a one-time champion? How did you feel like you, I guess, gave your input in trying to get the team to sustain its sort of success over time?
Well, it was a conversation we had going back really to before the season was over. Because you're always working ahead in the National Football League, and we were thinking about the offseason and free agency and players that we might lose and players that we might be able to bring in. And clearly when you have a Super Bowl team, you want to keep as much of that group together, particularly when you have a Super Bowl team where almost every important player is relatively young. Frankly, we were a little bit skeptical that we would be able to keep as many of the guys in Kansas City as we ultimately were able to do. And I think that's a credit to Brett and his staff and the job they did. And I think also the fact that those players want to be in Kansas City. They want to be playing for the Chiefs, playing with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid because they know they've got another shot this year to win a Super Bowl.
Okay, we'll go to Blair Kerkhoff. Go ahead, Blair.
Mark, I just wondered if you're keeping up with your rivals in the AFC West during the draft and what maybe some of your observations have been with their draft picks.
Well, I won't get into specifics, but you can't help but notice what your rivals are doing, whether they're in the AFC West or just other teams throughout the National Football League that you're going to be competing with. And I think our AFC rivals specifically have had a very good draft. It seems like several of the teams have favored the offensive side with the mentality maybe of trying to keep up with our offense. But I don't want to speak too much to their thinking. But just looking at really across the league, there have been a lot of good players selected. I thought this draft, particularly the first round down into the middle of the second round, I thought it was a very deep draft. And I think a lot of teams have been able to help themselves as a result.
All right. Let's go to Pete Sweeney. Go ahead, Pete.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for taking some time. I was just wondering, when it comes to Patrick Mahomes and this contract that supposedly is going to set records as far as NFL history and so on and so forth, with negotiations presumably ongoing, how involved are you in talking to Brett Veach? Like, how often is it? And then when it comes to just your feelings on the matter, do you feel like a timetable is starting to become more clear as to when this thing could potentially get done?
Yeah, so I'll take the timetable question first. I really, can't say it's something that's going to happen in the next, 3 months or 6 months. It's a priority for us, and it's also a priority for Patrick's team. So I know it's something that's going to get done in the near term. Anytime that we're talking about a big contract for the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm intimately involved in those conversations with Brett and his cap staff. And I don't want to say we've been talking about this weekly because Brett's been very focused on the draft. As you know, and I know you've spoken to Brett and Andy, a lot of preparation had to go into turning this into a virtual draft, and that was a challenge for everybody. So, Patrick's contract hasn't been a priority here over the last month, but going forward it will be.
Okay, we'll go to Harold Kuntz. Go ahead, Harold.
Hey, Clark, thanks for making some time for us this morning. I really appreciate it. I have to ask you a question about, of course, the future going forward of football, obviously with so much uncertainty with the coronavirus. I know Jerry Jones had said something about he does believe football will be played, but has there been any talks with you guys about the possibility of having to potentially have to play in front of empty stadiums? Any plans going forwards about that and just the season and how it progresses with only training camp and, of course, with St. Joe's having training camp? Would training camp be changed and maybe your facility also going forward because of the coronavirus effect?
Yeah, well, I think, unfortunately, the truthful answer to many of those questions is we just don't know right now. We haven't had those discussions as an ownership group in terms of contingency plans for the league. I know it's something that the league has been thinking about. Once we get past the draft, it's something I'm sure that we'll start discussing at the committee level first, and then as an entire ownership. It'll obviously be only prudent to have some contingency plans because we just don't know how the pandemic is going to play out here over the next 3 to 4 months. It's hard to say, what would happen with training camp. I hope we're able to be up there in St. Joe, and that's our plan right now. But there's a scenario probably where that is not possible.
Okay, we'll go to Matt Derrick. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Clark, thanks as always for your time. I'm just curious, from looking at the players that you've picked up already, what are your impressions and what do you like about the guys that you've already taken?
Yeah, well, one thing I'll say about all three of the guys, and this came through when I had a chance to be on Zoom with them after they were selected, is how excited all three of them are to be Kansas City Chiefs. They were, I don't want to say stunned, but I think they were very happy to be selected by the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. They all three struck me as players who were very eager to get in as soon as they can and get to work. They're guys that really like the game of football, and I think will bring an attitude that will mesh very well with our locker room. Clearly, physically, all three of them are outstanding athletes and football players. Clyde is a very, very exciting, dynamic offensive player. Willie's going to be able to bring some speed to our linebacking core that I think will help us. And then, having another tackle that we can work on developing with Lucas, I think is going to be beneficial down the road.
All right, guys, we've got time for 3 more questions. Let's go Herbie, Adam, and then Nate. Go ahead, Herbie.
Hey, good morning, Clark, and thank you very much for taking the time to do this with us. This is a 2-part question here. You mentioned earlier the challenges of a virtual draft, and I'm curious your reaction on how the league handled it, your impressions of how this process has gone the last couple of days. And then lastly, we're obviously in unprecedented times here. How much has the cancellation of the owners' meeting last month in Florida affected the business side of what the Chiefs want to do this year, and also from an NFL point of view?
Yeah, so let's start with the draft. As the league went through the analysis and ultimately implemented the rules that this was going to be a completely virtual draft with everybody separated, there was a lot of angst, I think, around the National Football League, a lot of concern about the logistics. I heard a number of general managers, including Brett Veach, talk about it maybe making trades tough to execute. In truth, the last couple of days, I've been really, really surprised by how well it's worked, both from a Chiefs standpoint and then just watching the broadcast. It seems to be working well around the league. So the league and all the teams did a great job of adapting to it. I think it's the league's put on a tremendous show and has really highlighted a lot of the heroes of the coronavirus pandemic. So I think that's been a real positive. Let's see, the second part of your question was about the owners meeting. Certainly, yeah, the March owners meeting is the most important one of the year. It's, a 3 or 4 day meeting, where we have a chance to get together and really thoroughly discuss a lot of issues, particularly those that are pertinent to the upcoming season. So missing that was impactful. We did have a virtual call in place of that, but that was a couple-hour virtual call, and it's hard to replace what you would have done in three or 4 days. We have a scheduled May meeting where we usually circle back around and handle some of the business that didn't get taken care of at the March meeting. That May meeting, which will be a virtual meeting also, is going to be very important now because there are a lot of decisions that have to be made. Specifically the competition committee report. We didn't do that in March, so we'll have to do that in May. And there'll be, some rule changes that we've got to consider at that time.
Okay, we'll go to Adam. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Clark. There was a question earlier about what the other AFC West teams are doing, and I won't ask you to go into particulars there, but it's safe to say that they're coming after you. And I wanted to ask you, after all these years, the Chiefs being the hunters, what's that like for this organization now to be the hunted, that you're the ones that everybody's coming after?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously, what we've worked really for 5 decades to do is to get back to the top and to be the best team in the National Football League, to be the team that other teams and their fans aspire to be. It's a great feeling. And, I think, every player we add to the team, you really analyze that player in the context of what he brings to our championship squad. And when you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, it's a very comforting feeling, knowing that you're bringing in players that can help his offense be better or help the defense put the team in a better situation.
Okay, Nate Taylor, you want to close us out?
Yeah, thanks again, Clark. My last question is, in terms of you being brought up through Lamar, understanding the historical context of the league, the competitive balance that makes it so fun for fans and everybody in the franchise, there has not been that many back-to-back champions. And I'm just wondering, based on your history and understanding how the league works, do you feel like you have a good sense of what it takes for teams to become back-to-back championships, why it's so hard to obtain such a feat, and what gives you confidence that this particular group may be the next team to accomplish such?
Yeah, well, I think there are probably a couple reasons that make it hard for teams to repeat. First of all, as a champion, your schedule's a little bit harder than everybody else. We're going to see the best teams in the AFC. as well as many of them in the NFC. So that mechanism makes it tough. I also think there's a possibility or a tendency to have a letdown after you win a championship, after you chase something for a long time. The players and coaches, it's very hard to come back, with the same energy that you had. Clearly, coming out of 2018, we had a little chip on our shoulder, right? We were just on the doorstep, or as Andy likes to say, 4 inches, for making it to the Super Bowl. And so I think that really served as motivation. So that'll be our challenge, is coming back with the same desire and intensity that we had last year. I feel really good about our coaching staff. We're blessed to have Andy leading it, have tremendous continuity across the coaching staff, which you don't often have with Super Bowl teams. I think that's another thing that holds other Super Bowl teams back from repeating. Well, we've brought everybody back there. We have almost the entire nucleus from the player standpoint, and those players are generally on the young side of their careers. So that's not a lot of them saying, okay, I finally got that done. I got that ring that I've been chasing for a long time. I think these guys are hungry. And I also think, maybe this unusual offseason we're having could play to our favor. Whenever we're able to get back together and start practicing, because of the continuity we have at every level, we're going to have a lot of advantages that other teams have. So, those would be my thoughts in terms of our chance. Our goal every year is to win the Super Bowl, but I think clearly Andy has stated already that he wants to be back there on that stage at Union Station next February.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Links to the stories we discussed can be found in the show notes. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. Still stands, and it's a good one. $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage. Come on, that's terrific. But here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star. Sports, news, features, commentary, analysis, the whole shebang. You get all the stories written by my uber-talented colleagues. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. Okay, I'll give you a second to get a piece of paper and pen before I repeat it. So I'm waiting. Here we go. account.kansascity.com/subscribe. In either case, the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you'll be supporting local journalism and helping us deliver products like SportsBeat KC, which, by the way, will be back tomorrow because this is where we talk sports every day.